The girl walked slowly through the crowded streets, her small shoes worn out and her coat thin against the cold. The sun had just begun to rise, but the city was already alive with people rushing to work, cars honking, and shopkeepers opening their doors. She carried with her only a small cloth bag, and inside it were the few things that mattered to her. A notebook with sheet music, a tiny pencil, and a photograph of a piano from a magazine. Every step she took reminded her of the long nights she had spent without food, sleeping wherever she could find a safe spot. Hunger had become her constant companion, but so had hope, even if it was a fragile thing. She paused outside a bakery where the smell of fresh bread made her stomach growl. People lined up to buy their breakfast, chatting and laughing, completely unaware of her presence. She could see their warm sandwiches and sweet pastries, and her mouth watered. She hugged her bag closer to herself, wishing she had just a little money or even a crumb. She wanted to ask for food, but her pride kept her quiet. Instead, she pressed on, moving toward the open square in the middle of the city where street musicians often played. Sometimes just listening to the music made her feel less alone. Finding a bench near the fountain, she sat down and pulled out her notebook. She opened it carefully, turning the pages to a melody she had written herself months ago. Her fingers traced the notes lightly, almost as if she could play them in the air. She hummed softly, the tune escaping her lips in a whisper that only she could hear. People passed by, some glancing at her curiously, most too busy to notice. The music in her head gave her courage and made the cold morning feel a little warmer. She thought about her past, about how she had learned to play the piano when she was very young. It wasn't easy. She had no lessons, no proper piano at home, only scraps of advice from a kind neighbor who loved music. That neighbor had taught her the basics, showing her how to press the keys and read the notes. Soon, she realized she could play anything she imagined. She would close her eyes and let her hands dance across the imaginary keys. Music became her friend, her escape from the hard world around her. But even with all her talent, life had been harsh. Her family had no money, and one by one, she had lost the people who had cared for her. Now she was alone, surviving day by day. The sound of laughter caught her attention. A group of children ran by, carrying their breakfasts, and she felt a pang of longing. She thought about how much she wished she could join them, even for a simple piece of bread. She wondered if anyone would listen to her if she asked. She had never begged before, not for herself, not like this. The thought made her heart pound, but her hunger was sharp, insistent. She had to try. She had to find a way to survive for today. As she walked toward the larger square, she noticed a restaurant with glass doors and a piano inside. The restaurant looked fancy, with people sitting at tables, sipping coffee, and eating their meals in comfort. She stopped for a moment, her eyes fixed on the piano. It was polished, shining, and waiting as if it had been made for her hands. A daring thought crossed her mind. What if she asked to play? What if she could offer her music for a little food? Her heart raced, a mix of fear and hope. She had never done anything like this before, but the hunger in her stomach pushed her forward. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to the door. The staff glanced at her, some frowning, some laughing quietly. She kept her head high and spoke in a small, clear voice. "Excuse me. May I play for a piece of food?" The words hung in the air, almost fragile, like a small bird in a cage. For a moment there was silence. Then laughter broke out. People looked at her as if she had asked something impossible, ridiculous. Some whispered to each other, smiling at her audacity. She felt her cheeks burn, but she did not step back. She had to try. One of the waiters shook his head and said, "Play? Here? For food? You're joking, right?" She shook her head slowly, her eyes steady. "No, I'm not joking," she said softly. "I only ask for a small meal. I can play for you." The waiter looked at her for a long moment, then shrugged, more out of curiosity than belief. "Fine," he said, motioning her toward the piano. "But make it quick. And don't expect much." She nodded, trying not to show how nervous she was. Her hands trembled slightly, but her mind was sharp. She was ready. Sitting down at the piano, she took a deep breath and let her fingers hover over the keys. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the wood under her hands, imagining the melodies she had practiced countless times. Then, she pressed the first note. It was soft, hesitant, but it grew steadily. The music flowed from her fingers, delicate at first, then richer, stronger. The people in the restaurant started to notice. Some stopped talking, turning their heads. The laughter faded as the melody filled the room. Her eyes opened, and she saw expressions of surprise, curiosity, even wonder. She did not care about the food yet. She only cared about the music, about letting it speak for her, about letting the world hear what she had carried in her heart for so long. As she played, memories of her past floated in her mind. The nights she had spent imagining a real piano, the neighbor who had first taught her the scales, the loneliness and hunger that had shaped her life. Every note she played carried a piece of her story, her struggle, her dreams. The audience listened, captivated, drawn into the sound. Her music had the power to make people forget themselves, to silence their chatter and laughter. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, her life could change from this single moment. By the time she finished the first piece, the room was quiet. No one moved or spoke. The waiter, who had doubted her, looked at her with wide eyes. Some customers whispered to each other, their faces showing disbelief. She took a small bow, her heart pounding, and looked at the plate of food that had been placed in front of her. It was a simple meal, just enough to fill her stomach, but it felt like a treasure. She smiled faintly, grateful, and then began another piece, letting her music soar even higher than before. She knew that this was only the beginning, that her journey had just started, and that music would guide her through the challenges ahead. The girl played on, her hunger still present but now mixed with something stronger. A feeling of possibility, of being seen, of having a voice. And though the city outside continued its rush, inside that small restaurant, for a little while, there was magic and she was at the center of it. The girl's hands hovered over the piano keys, her heart racing as she looked at the small audience that had gathered inside the restaurant. The waiter had gone back to his duties, leaving her alone with the piano and the curious eyes of strangers. Some people whispered among themselves, some looked skeptical, and a few were already smiling, sensing something different about her. She took a deep breath and began to play a simple melody, soft at first, like a gentle breeze moving through the room. Her fingers moved carefully, each note deliberate, each pause intentional. She wanted to earn the right to be heard, to show that she was more than just a hungry girl asking for food. The first few notes were quiet, almost timid, but there was a precision in her playing that could not be ignored. People started leaning forward, their conversations fading into silence. The melody grew richer, more confident, and with each chord, her presence became stronger. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her, letting her memories and emotions flow into every note. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, imagining a piano under her fingertips, dreaming of a day when she could play for someone who would listen. That day, she realized, had come. One of the older men sitting near the window leaned back in his chair, his eyebrows raised in surprise. He had seen street performers before, but there was something different about her. It was not just the music. It was the way she seemed to belong to it, as if the piano had been waiting for her all along. A woman at the counter covered her mouth in astonishment, her coffee forgotten as she listened to the skillful touch of the girl's fingers. Even the chef in the kitchen peeked through the door, curiosity replacing the irritation he usually felt at interruptions. As she played, the girl thought about how she had learned to improvise, how her imagination had become her teacher. She could remember the patterns of notes in her mind, how they danced together to form something beautiful. Today, she would show them all, not to boast, but simply to express herself and, perhaps, to earn that small piece of food she had hoped for. The music swelled, filling the space, touching the hearts of those who listened. She felt a strange power, a connection between herself and the people who had first doubted her. For a moment, The laughter that had greeted her request seemed very far away. A young couple sitting at a corner table exchanged looks of surprise. They had expected a simple tune, maybe something clumsy and hesitant, but what they heard was something professional, something moving. The girl's fingers danced across the keys, faster now, weaving a tapestry of sound that was both intricate and beautiful. She felt a thrill, a rush of energy that made her forget the cold mornings and empty stomachs. For those few minutes, she was no longer a girl asking for food. She was an artist, a storyteller, a creator whose language was music. Her mind wandered briefly to the people who had never believed in her. Those who had laughed at her talent, those who had ignored her dreams, those who had called her foolish for wanting more than survival. She did not play for revenge or anger. She played to show them that the human spirit could rise above circumstances, that even someone small and hungry could have a gift that could captivate and inspire. She felt tears threaten to fall, but she brushed them aside. She had learned to turn emotion into art, and that was what she did now, letting the piano become the voice she could not speak aloud. The notes became more complex, her fingers flying across the keys with precision and grace. The simple melody she had started with transformed into something magnificent, something that could touch souls. People watched in amazement, some holding their breath, afraid to break the spell. Even the staff who had laughed at her initial request now looked on with disbelief. The girl noticed them, but she did not let it distract her. She had found her rhythm, her confidence growing with every passing measure. A man near the front, who had been skeptical at first, whispered to his friend, "Can she really play like that? It sounds impossible." His friend nodded, equally stunned. A little boy at a nearby table stared with wide eyes, imagining himself one day creating such beautiful music. The restaurant, usually filled with chatter and clinking dishes, had become a quiet sanctuary, a place where the girl's music ruled. She could feel the attention, the respect, and it gave her strength to continue. She shifted into a faster tempo, adding flourishes and improvisations she had created in her head. The sound was mesmerizing, unpredictable yet harmonious. People leaned in closer, some recording on their phones, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Even the chef, who prided himself on his seriousness, allowed a small smile to form. He could not deny the talent in front of him. It was a rare thing, a moment that could not be forgotten. The girl's hands moved with confidence now, each note carrying emotion, memory, and hope. She thought of the nights she had gone hungry, the days she had walked the streets, the people she had passed by who never noticed her. Those experiences had shaped her, had given her depth and feeling that now flowed into the music. She felt a sense of liberation, a moment of victory. In that restaurant, for a short while, she was not a beggar. She was a musician, commanding attention with nothing but her skill and her heart. Time seemed to stretch, the song carrying on longer than she had planned. She played with abandon, each note more expressive than the last. She could see some customers wiping their eyes, moved by the unexpected beauty. A few children clutched their parents' hands, eyes wide, sensing the magic of the moment. The girl did not stop to consider fame or recognition. She played because it was her truth, the language she had always known, the story she had wanted to tell. Eventually, she slowed the melody, bringing it back to the gentle theme she had begun with. The transition was smooth, elegant, leaving the listeners in awe of her control and artistry. As the last note lingered in the air, there was a heartbeat of silence, a pause where everyone simply breathed, not wanting to disturb the spell. Then, slowly, applause began to grow. It was quiet at first, then louder until it filled the room. Some clapped softly, some cheered, and a few even whistled, all showing their appreciation for the unexpected brilliance that had graced their day. The waiter, who had been skeptical, approached her, eyes wide. I didn't know you could play like that," he said, almost unable to believe it. The girl smiled faintly, bowing her head in a polite gesture. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice steady. It was enough for her. She had shown them her gift, and in return, she had earned not just a meal, but a small spark of recognition and respect. The plate of food that was placed before her now seemed even more precious, a symbol of her courage and talent. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling warmth not just from the food but from the experience itself. She had dared to ask for something so small and had given something so great in return. Her mind wandered to the possibilities that lay ahead. If she could capture hearts with a piano in a simple restaurant, what else could she do? The thought filled her with hope. Perhaps one day she would have her own stage, her own piano, and an audience that came not out of curiosity but because they loved her music. For now, she focused on the present. The hunger that had driven her to take this risk was eased, and her spirit felt lighter. She looked around the room, noticing the smiles, the astonished faces, the people who had stopped to listen and appreciate her art. It was a rare and beautiful moment, one that reminded her why she had kept her music close all these years. She had taken a chance, and it had been worth it. And as she finished her meal, she felt a sense of determination, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey that would lead her far beyond the streets she had once wandered. The girl sat quietly at the piano after her meal, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. She had felt the warmth of food in her stomach, but the excitement of performing and seeing the reaction of the audience lingered in her mind. The restaurant was quiet now, most of the customers returning to their routines, though a few stayed, still curious, still captivated by the skill they had witnessed. She took a deep breath and thought about what to play next. This time, she wanted to show more of herself, to let them hear not just her ability but the depth of her emotions. As she began to play, she focused on the story she wanted the music to tell. Each note was deliberate, carrying the memory of the long nights she had spent alone, the hunger that had been her constant companion, and the dreams that had kept her moving forward. The melody started soft, tender, almost like a whisper, but it slowly grew stronger, more confident. Her hands moved with a natural grace, telling a story without words. People who had been passing by or finishing their meals stopped, drawn by the beauty of her playing. The room seemed to transform, filled with emotion, leaving the mundane world outside behind. A young man sitting near the front leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. He had come for breakfast but found himself completely captivated by the music. He whispered to his companion, "I've never heard anyone play like this before." His companion nodded, eyes wide, unable to look away. Others around them had the same reaction, their previous chatter and laughter replaced by silence and awe. The girl did not notice them individually. She only noticed the music, the way it felt as it flowed from her heart through her fingers and into the room. Her mind wandered briefly to the past, to the moments when she had played on a broken keyboard she had found discarded near the park. She remembered sitting on the cold ground, letting the notes rise from her imagination because she had no piano to play. Those days had been hard, but they had shaped her, had made her hands precise, her touch gentle yet powerful. She smiled faintly to herself, knowing that every struggle had led her to this moment, where her music could touch the hearts of strangers and turn their curiosity into admiration. As the song progressed, she began to add subtle improvisations, little flourishes that made the melody her own. The people listening were mesmerized, some holding their hands over the IR mouths in disbelief. The waitress who had initially doubted her talent stopped by with a cup of water, hesitating to interrupt, and instead just watched, amazed at how effortlessly the girl made the piano sing. The chef, usually so serious and stern, had come out of the kitchen, leaning against the doorway with a rare look of genuine admiration. It was as if the music had cast a spell over the room, softening even the hardest faces. The girl noticed the children in the corner, sitting quietly on the floor, eyes wide, completely enthralled. She thought of how music could reach anyone, regardless of age or status, and how it could create a shared experience that went beyond words. She played with this thought in mind, making sure the melody carried warmth, hope, and joy, even as it spoke of struggle and longing. She wanted them to feel her story, to understand her journey not through conversation but through the language of music. Her fingers danced across the keys with increasing confidence. She transitioned into a slightly faster pace, allowing her emotions to guide the tempo. She thought about the people who had doubted her, laughed at her request, or ignored her existence. She did not play for revenge. She played to express herself, to show the world the beauty that could come from someone who had nothing but their talent and determination. The room was alive with the sound, yet it was a calm, respectful energy, each listener caught in the web of her music, unable to look away. She continued for what felt like hours, though in reality it was much shorter. Every note, every chord, every pause was meaningful. She felt herself merge with the piano, as if they were one, and in that moment, nothing else existed. Outside the restaurant, the city carried on with its noise and rush, but inside, time had slowed, allowing the girl to show her gift without distraction. Even the air seemed different, vibrating with the sound of the music and the quiet awe of the audience. At one point, she noticed a man who had been quietly sitting alone, eyes glistening with tears. He reached out and touched the arm of the person next to him, whispering something about the beauty of the music. The girl's heart swelled, not with pride, but with the realization that her music could truly affect people, that it could bring emotion to those who had perhaps forgotten how to feel deeply. This was more than recognition. This was connection, and it was far more valuable than any applause or meal. She allowed herself a small smile as she moved into the final part of her performance. The melody became gentle again, returning to the tender, soft theme that had started the song. It was a full-circle moment, a reflection of her journey from struggle to expression, from silence to voice. The room remained quiet, as if no one wanted to break the spell she had created. She felt a sense of calm, a deep satisfaction, knowing she had poured her heart into something that mattered. As she played the final note, it lingered in the air, resonating softly in the ears and hearts of those listening. A pause followed, a heartbeat of silence where everyone simply breathed, taking in what they had just experienced. Then, gradually, the applause began, soft at first, then louder until it filled the room. People clapped, cheered, and smiled, some standing to show their appreciation. The girl bowed her head politely, her chest rising and falling with relief and happiness. She had taken a risk, and it had been worth every second. The waiter approached her once again, a different expression on his face now. He had gone from skepticism to awe, unable to hide his admiration. I had no idea you could play like that," he said quietly, shaking his head. The girl simply nodded, accepting the words but not letting them define her. She was not playing for praise or approval. She was playing because it was who she was, because music was her truth, and because she had finally found a place where people could hear it. She looked around the room, noticing the customers who had stayed behind, still talking in low voices about what they had just heard. She noticed the young boy who had clutched his mother's hand tightly, eyes wide with wonder. She noticed the chef who had returned to his kitchen, now smiling quietly to himself. And she noticed the warmth of the people who had once laughed at her, now offering respect without words. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. For the first time in a long while, the girl felt a sense of belonging. Not because she owned anything, not because she had money or status, but because she had shared her gift and touched lives. Music had become her voice, her bridge to the world, and in that moment, it seemed limitless. She finished the song with a soft, final chord, letting it fade into silence. She allowed herself a deep breath, closing her eyes briefly, savoring the feeling of accomplishment and connection. When she finally stood and stepped away from the piano, people continued to talk about what they had just experienced. Some asked who she was, some whispered about the possibility of seeing her play again, and others simply nodded, moved in ways they could not fully explain. She felt a quiet pride, not from their admiration, but from knowing she had dared to take a chance, to step forward despite fear and hunger. And as she gathered her notebook and small bag, ready to continue her day, she realized that this experience had changed her, had given her a glimpse of what was possible when talent met courage. She walked out of the restaurant slowly, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly from her shoulders. The city was busy, as it always was, but she no longer felt invisible. The people who had once ignored her, who had laughed at her, had seen her in a new light. And while she still had challenges ahead, she knew that her music would always be with her, a companion, a guide, and a way to touch the hearts of others. In that moment, the girl understood something profound. Even in the smallest, humblest acts, courage and talent could shine, creating moments of beauty that lingered long after the last note had been played. The girl sat at the piano again, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. After the reaction to her previous performance, she knew that everyone had noticed her talent, but she also knew that the moment could pass as quickly as it had come. She wanted to give them more, to show them the depth of her skill and the emotion that music could carry. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and she let her mind drift to the memories that had always inspired her melodies. Each note she played would be a reflection of her journey, of the hunger and loneliness she had endured, of the dreams she had kept alive despite everything. She started with a gentle tune, soft and slow, drawing the listeners in with a sense of intimacy. The restaurant was quieter than before, the earlier excitement replaced by a kind of anticipation. The customers who had witnessed her previous performance leaned forward, eager to hear what she would play next. Some had stopped what they were doing entirely, leaving plates of food untouched, completely absorbed in the sound. Even the staff paused, silently acknowledging the extraordinary skill before them. The girl's heart beat rapidly, but her hands were steady. Music had always been her language, and she let it speak freely. As the melody progressed, she began to weave in more complex patterns. Her fingers moved with speed and precision, creating harmonies that seemed impossible for someone so young and humble. She remembered the nights she had spent practicing in secret, the cold floors and the empty rooms, imagining a piano that had never been hers. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt was now reflected in the music she played. She felt a deep connection to the people listening, even though they did not know her story. Through her music, she could make them feel what she had felt, a shared humanity that needed no words. The audience was captivated. A man at a table near the window could not stop himself from holding his hands to his chest, overwhelmed by the beauty of the sound. A young woman covering her mouth looked around to see if anyone else was feeling the same awe. People were recording the performance on their phones, whispering to each other in disbelief. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the purity and depth of emotion that the girl's music conveyed. It was clear that what they had first thought of as a humble request for food had turned into a profound experience that no one would forget. The girl transitioned into a faster, more intricate section of the piece, letting her creativity flow. Her fingers danced across the keys, producing a sound that was both playful and intense. She allowed herself a small smile, realizing that this was the moment she had dreamed of for years. The melodies she had imagined in her mind, the songs she had hummed alone at night, were now alive in the room, connecting her to every person present. The music carried a story of hope, of perseverance, and of the beauty that could be found even in the hardest circumstances. Her mind drifted to the people who had doubted her in the past. She did not play for revenge, but for proof that talent could emerge from unexpected places. She thought of the neighbors who had ignored her, the strangers who had walked past her on the streets without a second glance, and the moments when she had wondered if anyone would ever appreciate her gift. Now, as she played, she could feel their skepticism being replaced with admiration, a silent acknowledgement of her skill. Her music had become a bridge between her life and theirs, a language that could be understood without explanation. The melody shifted again, this time becoming more emotional, almost like a conversation between her heart and the listeners. Each chord carried her feelings, each note a reflection of her resilience. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for every sound to finish before it could move again. People were drawn into the story, feeling the highs and lows of her journey without needing a single word. Even the children sitting quietly in the corner seemed to sense the power of the music, their eyes wide and their faces still in awe. As the performance continued, she began to add her personal touch, improvising sections that she had never played aloud before. It was risky, but she trusted her instincts. The music became richer, more layered, with sudden shifts in tempo and tone that kept the audience completely engaged. She could see the expressions of astonishment on their faces, the way some of them leaned forward, the way others closed their eyes to better hear every nuance. It was a moment of pure connection, where the girl's talent and the listener's attention merged into something extraordinary. The girl thought about how far she had come. From a life of hunger and uncertainty to this moment of recognition, she felt a surge of confidence. She realized that her music had the power to change perceptions, to make people see beyond appearances and circumstances. The laughter that had greeted her request for food was now replaced with admiration and respect. She had transformed a moment of vulnerability into an expression of her unique gift, and the impact was clear on every face in the room. She allowed herself to play with emotion even more deeply now, letting the story of her struggles, hopes, and dreams unfold naturally through the piano. The room was silent except for the sound of her fingers on the keys, a testament to the spell she had cast. People were completely absorbed, some holding back tears, some whispering to themselves in wonder. The waitress who had doubted her watched in awe, unable to hide her admiration. The chef, standing quietly at the doorway, shook his head with a small smile, acknowledging the rare talent in front of him. The girl did not need their approval. The music itself was enough, but she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing she had touched them. As the piece approached its climax, she played with intensity and passion, her fingers moving faster, her emotions flowing freely. The complexity of the music showed not just technical skill but a deep understanding of expression and feeling. Each note resonated with the audience, creating an atmosphere that was almost tangible. The melodies rose and fell like waves, carrying the listeners along with them. Even those who had been skeptical from the beginning could not help but be drawn in, completely captivated by the talent before them. Finally, she began to bring the music to a gentle close, returning to the soft, tender theme that had started the performance. The final notes lingered in the air, allowing the audience to absorb the beauty of what they had just heard. A moment of silence followed, as if the world itself paused to appreciate the magic. Then, slowly, applause began, first quiet, then louder until it filled the room. People stood, some cheering, some clapping with tears in their eyes, all showing their appreciation for the extraordinary performance they had witnessed. The girl rose from the piano, her chest rising and falling with relief and joy. She had taken a risk, asked for something so small, and in return had given something so great. The plate of food that had been offered to her earlier now seemed almost symbolic, representing not just her immediate need, but the validation of her courage and talent. She accepted it with a quiet smile, knowing that the experience itself was far more valuable than anything she could have imagined. As she gathered her belongings and prepared to leave, she noticed the people around her talking quietly, sharing their astonishment with one another. Some were discussing her skill, some were asking who she was, and others simply marveled at the unexpected beauty they had experienced. The girl walked out of the restaurant with a sense of pride and hope, feeling the weight of her struggles ease slightly. She knew that the journey ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time, she felt a sense of possibility, a belief that her music could take her to places she had only dreamed of before. Walking through the streets again, she reflected on the events of the morning. The laughter, the doubt, the skepticism, all had turned into admiration and respect. She realized that her music had the power to connect people, to change how they saw her and perhaps even how they saw themselves. Every note had been a message, every melody a story, and she had succeeded in sharing it with the world. The city seemed a little less harsh, the day a little brighter, and her heart a little lighter. For the first time in a long while, she felt that she had a place in the world, not because of wealth or status, but because of the gift she carried within her. The piano had always been her companion, her refuge, and now it had become a bridge between her and the people who had witnessed her talent. She understood that music could open doors, create opportunities, and touch lives in ways that words often could not. And as she walked on, she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would take her far beyond the streets she had once wandered, into a future filled with possibility, hope, and the enduring power of her music. The girl returned to the piano the next morning, carrying her small bag and her notebook of sheet music. She had slept in a quiet corner the night before, but her mind had not rested. The memory of the reactions she had received the day before replayed in her mind, and she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. She knew that today she wanted to go further, to share more of herself and the music that had been her companion for so long. Her fingers hovered over the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the coolness of the piano beneath her hands. She took a deep breath, letting the anticipation settle in her chest, and began to play. The first notes were gentle, like a whisper of dawn breaking over a quiet city. People passing by the restaurant paused, drawn in by the soft, melodic sound. Those who had been in the restaurant the day before recognized the music and stopped to listen once again. There was a sense of familiarity and comfort, and soon a small crowd gathered outside, peeking through the windows, listening without wanting to miss a single note. The girl felt a thrill run through her, a mixture of fear and joy. Today was a chance to show that the music she played yesterday had not been a one-time occurrence. Her talent was real, and she intended to prove it. As the melody grew, she began to add subtle complexities, small improvisations that made the music feel alive. Her hands moved quickly and effortlessly across the keys, producing a harmony that seemed larger than the small room itself. The notes carried stories of past hardships, long nights spent hungry, and the dreams she had clung to for survival. She remembered the neighbors who had ignored her, the strangers who had passed by without a glance, and even those who had laughed at her when she asked to play for food. But she no longer thought of them with resentment. Instead, she let those experiences fuel her expression, turning every hardship into beauty. Inside the restaurant, the regular customers and staff watched her with amazement. The waiter who had first allowed her to play approached quietly, almost afraid to disturb the performance. "It's incredible," he whispered, eyes wide. She nodded politely, keeping her focus on the piano. The chef, standing at the doorway with arms crossed, allowed himself a small smile, his earlier skepticism replaced with admiration. Even the young children sitting in the corner seemed captivated, their attention unwavering. The girl felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her music could reach them, touch them, and perhaps even inspire them in ways she could not fully see. The tempo of the music changed, becoming more lively and expressive. The girl's fingers moved with precision, her hands flying across the keys, creating a sense of motion and energy. The audience was completely absorbed, leaning in to hear every note, every nuance. Some closed their eyes, letting the music fill their minds, while others whispered to each other in disbelief, sharing their wonder. The girl smiled faintly as she played, feeling the connection growing stronger. Music had always been her companion, and now it was her bridge to the world, a way to communicate without words. She thought about the people who had doubted her talent, who had laughed when she asked for food in exchange for music. They had not understood her potential, but she did not play for their approval. She played to share her story, her emotions, and the journey that had brought her to this moment. The music carried every experience she had ever had, transforming her struggles into a melody that resonated deeply with anyone who listened. The room seemed to vibrate with energy, each note echoing the strength and determination she had cultivated over the years. The girl's performance became more intricate as she incorporated elements of improvisation, letting her creativity guide her. She experimented with rhythms and harmonies, creating a sound that was both complex and natural. The audience was captivated, some holding their hands to their chests in awe, others quietly recording the performance on their phones. Each person reacted differently, but all shared the same sense of wonder. The girl noticed the expressions, the subtle signs of emotion, but she did not let them distract her. She was in her element, fully immersed in the music, letting it flow through her. As the piece progressed, she began to infuse it with emotion, allowing the audience to feel the depth of her experiences. The music spoke of loneliness and hunger, but also of hope and perseverance. It told a story of resilience, of a girl who had faced countless challenges and refused to give up. People could feel the authenticity in every note, the sincerity in her performance, and it moved them deeply. Even those who had been skeptical or indifferent the day before were now visibly affected, their eyes reflecting surprise, admiration, and respect. A man standing near the window whispered to his companion, "She's amazing. I've never heard anything like this before." His companion nodded, equally captivated, their eyes fixed on the girl as she played. A young boy in the corner of the room stared wide-eyed, imagining himself one day creating something so beautiful. The girl felt a quiet pride, not in herself, but in the connection she had created through her music. She realized that her talent was not just a gift for herself, but a way to touch the lives of others, to inspire, to bring joy and emotion into their day. She allowed herself to explore the piano even further, creating melodies that she had only ever imagined in her mind. The sound filled the room, creating an atmosphere of magic and wonder. People stopped talking, the usual clinking of dishes faded, and the focus shifted entirely to her. Even the staff, who had been busy with their duties, paused to listen, recognizing the extraordinary skill before them. The girl felt a surge of confidence, knowing that she had captured their attention and respect. Her music had transformed the restaurant into a place of beauty and shared experience. As the performance reached its climax, she played with intensity, passion, and precision. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keys, creating a harmony that was both intricate and emotionally powerful. The audience was completely absorbed, some holding back tears, some whispering softly to themselves in awe. The girl did not play for applause or recognition. She played because it was who she was, because music was her truth, and because she wanted to share a piece of herself with the world. The connection she felt with the listeners was profound, a silent acknowledgement of her talent and the journey that had brought her here. Finally, she began to bring the music to a gentle close, returning to the soft, tender melody that had opened the performance. The last notes lingered in the air, allowing the audience to absorb the beauty and emotion of what they had just witnessed. A moment of silence followed, a pause in which everyone simply breathed, savoring the experience. Then, slowly, applause began, growing louder and louder until it filled the room. People stood, cheered, and clapped, some moved to tears, all showing their appreciation for the extraordinary performance. The girl stood, her chest rising and falling with relief and joy. She had taken a risk, asking for something so small in exchange for music, and in return had given something so great. The plate of food placed before her seemed symbolic, representing not only her immediate need, but also the recognition of her courage, determination, and talent. She accepted it with a quiet smile, knowing that the experience itself was far more valuable than any meal. Today, she had not only fed her body but also nourished her spirit. People continued to talk quietly about what they had just witnessed, sharing their astonishment with one another. Some asked who she was, others speculated about the potential of her future, and many simply marveled at the unexpected beauty they had experienced. The girl felt a sense of pride, not from their admiration, but from knowing she had dared to take a chance and share her gift. Music had become her voice, her bridge to the world, and a way to connect with people on a level deeper than words could reach. As she left the restaurant, walking through the streets once again, she felt a newfound sense of possibility. The city, which had once seemed harsh and unyielding, now felt like a place where her music could make a difference. The people who had once ignored her, who had doubted her, now recognized her talent, and it gave her hope for the future. She understood that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had taken a step toward a brighter, more hopeful life, guided by the power of her music. For the first time, she felt that she had a purpose beyond survival. Her talent was not just a gift for herself but a way to touch the lives of others, to inspire, to bring joy, and to create moments of beauty in an often difficult world. She walked on, her heart light, carrying the lessons of courage, perseverance, and the power of sharing her true self through music. And in that moment, she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would lead her far beyond the streets she had once wandered, into a future filled with hope, opportunity, and the enduring magic of her piano. The girl walked through the streets after her performance, her small bag slung over her shoulder, her heart full of a quiet joy that she had not felt in a long time. The city was alive with movement, with people rushing to their work and shops opening their doors. But for her, it seemed calmer, brighter. The music she had played earlier still echoed in her mind, blending with the sounds of the city around her. She felt a sense of hope growing within her, a feeling that she had finally found a way to show the world who she truly was. She had asked for so little, only a piece of food, and had given so much more in return. That gift, she realized, had opened doors she had never imagined. As she walked, she thought about the people who had witnessed her music, the expressions on their faces, the surprise and admiration, the quiet moments when they had been moved by her playing, all came back to her in vivid detail. She realized that her music had connected them to her story, even without words. Each note had carried her struggles, her dreams, and her hope, and it had reached their hearts. That connection, she understood, was more powerful than any applause or recognition. It was a reminder that even in the smallest acts, courage and talent could shine and touch lives in unexpected ways. She passed by a small park where children played, their laughter ringing through the air. She paused for a moment, listening, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her music, once a private world of imagination and practice, had become a bridge to others. She remembered the nights she had spent hungry and alone, dreaming of a piano that she did not have, imagining the melodies that would one day fill a room. Now those dreams were real, and they had led her to this moment, where her talent had been seen, heard, and appreciated. Her steps carried her to a quiet corner where she often rested. She sat on a bench, pulling out her notebook, and began to hum a new melody she had been working on. The sound was soft, almost intimate, a reflection of her thoughts and the quiet joy she felt. She imagined playing it for an audience, imagining their reactions, the way their faces would change as they listened, the way the room would hold its breath for every note. It was a moment of calm reflection, a chance to consider how far she had come and what might lie ahead. The day passed slowly, but her mind was active, filled with plans and dreams. She thought about returning to the restaurant, perhaps performing again, and about other places where her music could be shared. She wondered if someone would notice her talent and offer her a chance to learn more, to grow, to perform for larger audiences. These thoughts filled her with a cautious excitement. She knew that life was still uncertain, that challenges would remain, but she felt ready to face them. Her music had given her a voice, a way to be seen, and that voice was powerful. Later in the afternoon, she returned to the restaurant to thank the staff for allowing her to play. The waiter greeted her with a warm smile, and the chef nodded in quiet approval. They had come to recognize not just her talent, but her courage and determination. The customers who had been there earlier waved or smiled, acknowledging the girl who had turned a simple request for food into something extraordinary. She felt a sense of belonging, not because she had money or status, but because she had shared her gift and touched lives. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, a sense of community built on appreciation and respect. The girl sat at the piano once more, not for the applause or recognition, but because she loved to play. She played a soft, flowing melody, letting her fingers move with freedom and emotion. The music carried her story, but it also carried something larger, a message that even in difficult circumstances, beauty and hope could exist. The audience, small but attentive, listened quietly, drawn in by the sincerity of her playing. She smiled faintly as she played, feeling the connection between her heart and theirs, a silent understanding that transcended words. As the evening approached, she stepped outside, watching the sunset cast a golden glow over the city. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the struggles she had endured, and the moments of doubt she had overcome. She realized that her music had not only nourished her body but also her spirit, giving her a sense of purpose and direction. She felt a deep gratitude for the opportunity to share her gift, for the people who had listened and appreciated, and for the hope that had been rekindled within her. In the days that followed, the girl continued to play whenever she could, each performance building her confidence and skill. Word began to spread about the young musician who had captivated audiences with her piano. People came to listen, drawn not by curiosity, but by the promise of experiencing something beautiful and moving. The girl remained humble, focusing on her music rather than fame or recognition. She knew that the true value of her talent lay in the connection it created, in the moments of joy and reflection it could bring to others. Eventually, a kind stranger, noticing her remarkable ability, offered to help her pursue her music more seriously. The girl was hesitant at first, unsure if she could trust anyone with her dreams, but she accepted the opportunity with gratitude. She began to receive lessons, guidance, and encouragement, learning to refine her skills while staying true to the passion and emotion that had always defined her playing. Her life began to change in small but meaningful ways, opening doors she had never imagined. Through it all, the girl remained grounded, remembering the days of hunger and struggle that had shaped her. She never forgot the lessons she had learned on the streets, the courage it had taken to ask for food in exchange for music, and the power of believing in herself. She played with humility and sincerity, knowing that her journey was not just about personal success, but about inspiring others and showing that even in the most difficult circumstances, talent, determination, and hope could create beauty. The city continued to move around her, bustling with life and activity, but the girl felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had found her voice through the piano, a voice that could reach hearts, evoke emotion, and connect people across differences. She realized that her music was more than just notes on a page. It was a reflection of her spirit, a testament to resilience, and a gift that could brighten even the darkest days. And as she played, she knew that this was only the beginning, that her journey would continue, filled with opportunities to touch lives, create joy, and share the extraordinary gift that had been within her all along. As night fell, she walked home with a light step, her heart full of music and hope. She reflected on everything that had happened since the moment she had first asked to play for food, amazed at how a single act of courage had changed the course of her life. She had discovered that her talent was not only a means of survival but a bridge to a brighter future, one filled with purpose, connection, and possibility. The piano would always be her companion, her voice, and her way of sharing her story with the world. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage, guided by the power of her music and the knowledge that she had already transformed her life with a single, heartfelt melody.